Some people get richer during inflation. Not just protected, not just unaffected, richer. At the exact same time, others feel squeezed, stretched, slowly falling behind. Same economy, same currency, same moment in time. Completely different outcomes. And it doesn't happen by accident. It follows a pattern, a quiet one. Because inflation isn't just about prices rising, it's about who gets the new money first and who gets it last. And that difference changes everything. Right now, inflation is often explained as a simple story. Prices go up, money loses value, everyone suffers a little. But that's not how it actually plays out. Because money doesn't enter the economy all at once. It enters through specific doors. And those doors decide who benefits. Here's how it works. When governments spend beyond what they collect, or when central banks expand liquidity, new money is created. But it doesn't show up evenly in everyone's bank account. It moves through channels: banks, financial institutions, large corporations, asset markets. That's where it starts. And that starting point matters more than most people realize. Because at the moment new money enters, prices haven't fully adjusted yet. Everything still looks normal, which means the people closest to that new money can act before the system catches up. They can buy assets, stocks, real estate, commodities. They can invest. They can reposition. And they do it using money that hasn't yet been diluted by rising prices. That's the advantage. Not intelligence, not luck, timing. Now, compare that to everyone else. By the time new money flows outward, into wages, into everyday spending, it's already changed the landscape. Asset prices have moved, housing has become more expensive, markets have already reacted. So when that same money finally reaches you, it doesn't buy what it used to. Same currency, less access. And this is where the silent mechanism reveals itself. It's not just inflation, it's sequence. Who gets the money first, who gets it later, and how much the world has changed in between. This is sometimes called the first receiver advantage. But you don't need the term to understand the effect. If you're early, you move with the change. If you're late, you absorb it. And most people are late, not because they did something wrong, but because of where they sit in the system. Think about it. If you're in financial markets, you see liquidity first. If you're running a large business, you adjust prices early. If you own assets, their value responds quickly. But if you earn a fixed salary, you're waiting for adjustments, waiting for raises, waiting for the system to catch up. And while you wait, everything else is already moving. That gap between movement and response is where wealth shifts, quietly, consistently, and often invisibly. Here's where it gets more uncomfortable. Because inflation doesn't just raise prices, it redistributes purchasing power, from later receivers to earlier ones, from those holding cash to those holding assets, from reacting to positioned ahead of the curve. And the numbers don't have to be dramatic for this to matter. Even a few percentage points of inflation repeated over time create compounding effects. If asset prices rise 10% while wages rise 4%, that difference doesn't just sit there. It builds, year after year, cycle after cycle, until the gap becomes impossible to ignore. But by then, it feels like something else entirely. It feels like inequality, like unfairness, like some people just got ahead, without a clear reason why. And the explanation usually lands on familiar ideas: better decisions, higher risk tolerance, smarter investing. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's just positioning, being closer to the source of new money, being earlier in the sequence. And that's not always visible from the outside, because from a distance it looks like growth, markets rising, companies expanding, wealth increasing. But underneath that growth, there's a shift happening. Value is moving, not disappearing, moving, and not evenly. This is why inflation can feel confusing, because it doesn't hit all at once, and it doesn't hit everyone the same way. Some people feel it as higher prices, others experience it as rising net worth. Same force, different direction. And here's the part that often gets overlooked. By the time inflation becomes obvious to most people, the biggest transfers have already happened. The early phase, when prices are still stable but liquidity is rising, that's when the advantage is strongest. But it's also the least visible. No headlines, no urgency, just quiet movement in the background. Then later, when prices finally rise in everyday life, that's when it feels real. That's when people react. But by then, the system has already adjusted. The window has already moved, and the outcomes are already being locked in. This creates a strange dynamic, where the people reacting to inflation are often the ones most affected by it, and the people benefiting from it moved earlier, before it was obvious, before it was labeled, before it felt like a problem. And none of this requires conspiracy or coordination or intent. It's just how the system operates. Money flows. It enters somewhere, it spreads outward, and in that spread, timing creates winners and losers. Not instantly, but over time, quietly. Now zoom out, because this isn't just about a single moment, it's about repeated cycles. Every time new money enters the system, the same sequence plays out. Early receivers act, prices adjust, late receivers adapt. And with each cycle, the differences can grow. Not always in a straight line, but enough to matter, enough to reshape outcomes, and enough to explain why two people living in the same economy can experience inflation in completely different ways. One sees opportunity, the other sees pressure. One feels wealth increasing, the other feels stability slipping. Same system, different position. So the real question isn't just, is inflation rising? It's this: where are you in the sequence when it does? Because if inflation isn't just a rise in prices, but a shift in timing and access, then maybe the real divide isn't between people who understand money and those who don't. Maybe it's between those who move early and those who only realize what happened after everything has already changed.